How do you regain confidence after being bullied in the workplace? This is the Leaders of Transformation podcast. And on this show, we interview difference makers and world changers who are disrupting for good. I'm your host, Nicole Jansen, and our guest today is Zenica Chatman. Today, we're going to be talking about bullying in the workplace. She is a successful leader and a certified personal and executive coach who helps women to rediscover their inner strength and confidence in the aftermath of workplace related trauma. She has been featured in Fast Company on numerous podcasts and including Authentic Leadership for Everyday People, and Kandid Conversations. So today she's going to share with us her experience with bullying and how an ally made a big difference in her life, in her career, and in her well-being, and how you can establish a healthy relationship with work that puts you in the driver's seat. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. Zenica, welcome to Leaders of Transformation.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, well, let's get started and talk about a little bit more about your backstory and maybe a little bit more about what you do right now. And I know you work full time. You also have this coaching business that you're developing, and really why this topic is so near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, so this topic is near and dear to my heart, mostly because I lived it. I went through it, and I understand up close and personal what it feels like to be bullied at work and what it feels like to have to admit that to yourself and what it feels like to come back from that, how you can rebound from that and really go on to continue to have a very successful career. You know, your bullying experience doesn't have to define you.
So talk a little bit about that because I hear in what you just shared almost a little bit of guilt or shame or something around that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I actually did have a lot of guilt and shame around just my experience with being bullied. And once I was able to step away from it and start to really look at it with a different pair of eyes, there were a lot of things that I learned about myself during that process. But just to back up a little bit, it didn't start out that way. When I was experiencing the worst of the bullying, I was actually at what I would have considered my dream job. I felt like I had done everything right. I had followed all of the blogs, all of the career advice around how to build your career, how to land that big job, how to transition from one industry to the next. And I was so proud of myself that I did it, right? I took the big leap, I landed the great job. And when I was, you know, I got there, and for a very long time, I was living the dream. You would have thought my name was on the company door the way that I was so loyal to that company. And when my friends would complain about their work situation, I would say, where do you work? Because I do not have that problem. And it was really great until it wasn't. And it really started with a conversation with my leadership at the time where they pulled me into a room, and I had just had a performance review a couple of months earlier. And so it was totally unexpected, but they pulled me into a room, and one of the things that they said to me was, hey, you're the worst person on the team. I've never
Wow.
experienced an employee that's as terrible as you.
Wow. They actually came out and said that.
Absolutely. Those were the words.
And was it, I mean, accurate in the sense that, I mean, obviously you felt that you were doing a great job. Where
Yeah.
did that come from? I mean, I say
You know, that's
accurate.
the interesting thing
Yeah,
about
but
the story is
mm,
when I put myself back in that position, I put myself back in that seat. One of the first things that I did, which I learned about myself in that moment, was when they said that to me, I believed them. I immediately believed them, and I started to internalize that statement right then and there. That wow, I am the worst person on the team. I have got to fix this. And so that sent me into this next spiral where I was overworking myself because I was trying so desperately to fix it. And it's very difficult to fix a situation where you don't really have specific details, right, of how you're not excelling. It's very vague. It's very, well, we don't like this and we don't like that and we don't like these things about you. And so I went into this period where I would come in as I wanted to show my dedication. So I would be the first one in, the last one to leave. I would volunteer for all the projects, all the projects, anything that I could volunteer for to change this perception of me as being this terrible employee, but all the while still being met with consistent overbearing correction of my work. So I was being scrutinized more severely than anyone else on the team. I was constantly being pulled, right? So I'd already had this initial conversation, but there were several subsequent conversations where my work was even more scrutinized. There were questions around who I could speak with in the company.
Wow.
Right at this point, because I was now this quote terrible employee that needed to be babysat. And so there were questions around, how I was doing my work, which of course only led to even more depression, anxiety, lack of confidence in my ability. So it just started this very negative, toxic cycle for me.
So like, where did this come from? Where, from their perspective, why would they do that?
I will tell you from my perspective, and this is just my personal opinion, because again, kind of looking back on it, right,
Yeah.
hindsight, in this particular organization, and what I have found with a lot of my clients is, we like to say haters gonna hate. Well, a bully gonna bully. So there was
Yeah.
evidence of this bullying behavior long before I got there. And unfortunately, I really feel like it was just my turn. A bully's gonna bully, they're gonna find somebody to be the target. And it was really just, it was my turn at that particular
Mm.
moment. And I oftentimes teach my client too, and I don't dwell anymore so on if I tried to really figure out what was going on inside the heads of these people, I probably would have never recovered, right? And so I think that that's a piece of this where, I have to tell people, yes, we would love to know, why would somebody want to treat an employee this way? Why would you think that that's a great way to lead somebody to be a better person? Why would you want anyone on your team to feel that way? But there just comes a point, and there came a point for me personally where I had to get out of other people's head and step back into my body and do what I needed to do to get myself back to a better place.
Yeah, that's definitely wise advice, because yeah, I can go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Interesting that you said that there was this pattern from previous. I always think about, like, as a coach, insecure people
Yeah.
are going to try to pull other people down. And when I earlier said accurate, it sounded harsh, but it's like sometimes we've got feedback that we get, right? And we say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? There's things that you need to take, to take into consideration, to improve, to step up, and all those things. And then there's bullying. And then there's what you're talking about. And that's a very different thing. And so I'm thinking about also our listeners who might be listening out there and saying, am I getting constructive feedback on how, even though that, regardless, that was not delivered well, even if it was somebody who
Yeah.
needed constructive feedback. But sometimes we need to take that constructive feedback to say, how do we improve? And there's definitely a better way to deliver that information. However, then the other side of it is knowing, and I know you mentioned this when we were talking prior to this interview, is that you didn't even see it as bullying because it just felt wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes people don't realize where's the line, right? It can go both ways. Like,
Mhm.
oh, they're just being all of that, to me. And it's like, no, you need to step up. And then there's the other side of saying, you know what, I am working hard and I am doing a good job. And now they're just bullying me. So there's that understanding where somebody is, and being able to recognize where somebody's at so that they can move forward productively. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that, and how do people identify the bullying that they may be like? How do they know when they're being bullied? Maybe is a better way to
Yeah.
put it.
So I always get this question when I start talking about bullying. And you'd be surprised. I often get it from leaders who start to get nervous. They're like, wait a minute, am I bullying? Like, they want to make sure that they're not exhibiting bullying behavior. So I just like to level set people with, the definition of workplace bullying that I like to use is the one that's used by the Workplace Bullying Institute, which is a repeated health harming mistreatment of one or more employees by another group of employees or an employee. So this can be verbally. This can be behaviors that are perceived as threatening, intimidating, humiliating. So, it could be a number of things. It could look like work sabotage, which is something that happened to me where you're given an assignment and there's a key element that you don't have. And so you do it based on the parts that are given to you, and it comes back with, well, you didn't put this in it, but you never gave me all of the parts to get it done. It could also look like, you're consistently the butt of jokes, among a group of employees or by an employee. It can be, humiliating, someone humiliating you in a meeting. I mean, as simple as things that happened to me that were, my entire team would be invited to a meeting that I wasn't included on.
Crazy. Yeah.
Things like that, denying someone's PTO. So it's really, when you think about this repeated threatening or intimidating behavior, that is when someone has crossed the line into being a bully.
So why do women, I know you mentioned somewhere in our conversation and material that I had studied from you, is that it is especially detrimental to women. Certainly this happens to men. I've had
Mhm.
clients who have been bullied in the workplace, and it's like, what are they doing? And it's even oftentimes it's like top performers, and they're, come
Yeah.
on, what is going on with you people? But aside from that, let's talk about women and why it's so detrimental to women and their own confidence and identity, because I know that's been your experience as well, having to recover from that.
Yeah. So I do want to hit on the fact that you will find a lot of your bullying targets usually are high performers. And I also find that fascinating
Interesting.
that high
Yeah.
performers are typically the ones who are being bullied and are singled out. But yeah, when it comes to women, I think one of the things that makes it so detrimental to us is because so it's all of the other social cues that women have gotten around the workplace, right? And just around being a woman in general. And if you speak up, are you being too sensitive? And so when people start to kind of mistreat you and really cut at who you are in the workplace, there's this sense of, I don't feel like this is right. I don't feel like this is the way I should be treated in this job, but am I being too sensitive, right? You start to question yourself. And then it starts to chip away at your confidence, because a lot of us do suffer from imposter syndrome anyway. And so when you get in this environment where you're being told that at whatever level you're really not good enough, or you really don't deserve to be here, and that is now becoming evidence in how your workday is playing out, whether you're getting, you're constantly getting the red marks, the redlining on your assignments, or you're not allowed to talk to this person in the company because that's above your pay grade. When those things start to actually happen to you, it makes it a lot easier for you to internalize the imposter syndrome. And it also starts to give your brain proof of why that imposter syndrome could be true.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I guess as somebody who works in this space of leadership, it boggles my mind,
Yeah.
honestly, why you would, bully people in the workplace regardless. And like you said, that's an interesting fact, is that a lot of the people that are being bullied are actually high performers.
Mhm.
It anyway, mind boggling when supposedly the goal of business is to grow and be profitable and highly productive and all of that.
Right.
So anyway, we're going to shelf that one, because we can go, there's not a good answer for that. There's just need for change. Let's put it that
Mhm.
way. And let's talk about this idea of, I know, and maybe this is partly where it comes from, is this idea of leaving your feelings at the door,
Oh, yeah.
and why that's not a good idea, and for anybody on both sides of that interaction.
Well, for me, I mean, I think one reason it's not a good idea is because we are not machines. We're human beings. And, now after going through what I went through, I often will question when people say that, because I think where I tend to go, or what I have had, how I flip that statement now is, well, why would you want me to leave my humanity at the door? Leave my feelings
Yes.
at the door. Why? So that you can mistreat me, so that you can humiliate me, or so that you can humiliate the person in the cube next to me and I won't say anything, because
Yes.
we're all supposed to check our feelings at the door. And so this notion of dehumanizing people in the workplace, when none of us have any feelings, it means nobody has any empathy towards that person either, right? So it makes it a lot easier for you to bully them, for you to call them out, for you to make fun of them, if we're in this environment where none of us are supposed to feel that. When I even learned in my scenario too, that we think nobody's watching, but everybody in that culture, everybody in that environment feels what's happening to you.
Yes.
And so when we all start to leave our feelings at the door, it just creates a culture where we can harm others and not create that psychological safety that everyone is trying to create now in our workplaces.
Yes. And it's interesting because I've referenced this a number of times. There was a statistic one of my guests shared in his book a few months ago, and it was that 70% of senior executives do not know their identity or their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So they've checked their heart at the door, right? They're not connected to who they are. And then how can you possibly create a culture of humanity
Mm-hmm.
when the leaders are disconnected?
Yeah.
And it just goes down, and it's so counterproductive. Again, it's ridiculous when you think about what the perceived outcomes of
Yeah.
a business are, an organization are. It's that idea of greed and ego coming in, specifically
Mm-hmm.
that ego coming in. But anyway, I wanted to talk about this idea of the ally, because you mentioned about people around know what's happening. They feel it. They feel that even if it's not directed towards them, they feel that toxicity in the
Absolutely.
workplace. And they're like, oh, I don't want to be in this. And maybe this time it's her, and one day it might be me too, And so, or they kind of get hooked into it to, being part of it, party
Yeah.
to it.
Yes. Yes.
And then that
That's what we do.
also creates a negative impact on them. But you mentioned about having a woman who was an ally, who stepped in, and that really was like a catalyst moment for you in terms of changing the direction of your well-being and your career and all that. So talk about that.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, I mean, that was a very lonely place. I mean, there were days where, I felt like I worked by myself, right? Nobody wanted to get coffee with me, nobody wanted to go to lunch with me. But I had one friend, I had one ally, and she was the person that when things were really bad and I was at a place where and my role at this particular time was a communications based role, but I had been just deduced to the point where I couldn't write emails. It would take me a long time to just process and write very simple check-in, follow-up, those types of emails that we have to do every day in the corporate world, just because it would be such scrutiny once I pushed the send button. And I had to copy all of these leaders because everybody needed to check my work. And so I remember sending this over to her one day. And when times would get rough, I would do that. I would say, hey, would you check this for me? Can you look over this for me before I send it? And this had been going on for quite a few weeks, which I'm sure at this point she probably was a little tired of reading over all my emails. She had her own work to do. But she paused for a minute and she took a deep breath and she just looked at me. We were sitting in the cube and she turned her chair directly to face me and she said, I will not read any more emails for you. What they are doing to you is 100% wrong, but I will not tolerate what you are doing to you. You know your value, you know your worth, you know what you are capable of. You read that email one more time for yourself and you push send, and we're going to go have some pizza. And that was the moment for me that I realized I was not making this up. I was not being super emotional. I was being mistreated in this role, and I needed to get the heck out of there.
Wow. So at that moment when you decided did you just leave? Did you quit? How did that happen? And even for her, like, I know you mentioned she also had supported you even further. Like, that's amazing. I mean, just for her to get you to step out of
Yeah.
it for a moment and see it and be the observer and saying, wow, this is what's happening and what I'm doing to myself. That's just so powerful.
Yeah.
Um, so tell us a little bit more of that.
Yeah, so she definitely in that moment, she shined a light on me, right?
Mhm.
Because we often tend to focus on the external factors
Yes.
and the bullies, they were bullying and I was really upset at them. But what she did for me shined a light on myself and how I was choosing to show up in that moment. And so she really helped me to kind of put the focus back on this sucks. It absolutely sucks, but what are you going to do about it? And so I actually kind of started to seek counsel, started to get mentorship on the other side of that, started to advocate for myself a little bit, even amongst the bullies, just to kind of get a little bit of myself back. And I had been in the process where I was applying for jobs, and I like to say I was one of the lucky ones who I was able to find employment. I would say right at the tipping point. It was right at that point where if anybody listening has been in a really toxic environment, and like you're at the point where you're like, it's me or you. One of us is gonna go. It was right at that point that I actually was able to find something. And I like to say that I'm one of the lucky ones, because I know that many of the people who are in a bullying situation, they do have to leave without another form of employment. And that's another very serious implication of being bullied. And we know what that means for, especially for women, who many of us are already being paid less, but having to leave employment without other employment on the other side of that, and people of color. And that can be a huge financial impact on someone. So we're not just talking about mental and emotional impacts. There's also a huge financial impact associated with bullying as well.
Absolutely. So let's talk about on the other side of it,
Yeah.
right? So I know one of the things you said was, I went back into the work. Yes, you wanted to coach and you're now helping people, but you wanted to show, and I think that's so admirable, is, number one, it's wise from a financial standpoint. You're launching something new, helping and coaching others, but that you keep your full-time job, but you also wanted to do it for another reason. So talk a little bit about that. And then let's move into, like, what do people do to be able to prevent it? What do the people do to be able to,
Yeah.
recover from it, like what you did?
Yeah, so I chose um to launch this practice and launch this business while still working in the corporate world, because I think it's really important, especially when I coach my clients now. I think it's important for them to see this version of me that's
Yes.
still working, that's still been successful, that has a role where she loves her leadership and she loves her teammate, and she feels like she's actually contributing to the company in a very positive way. Because so many people, when they're in that place of just extreme toxicity and or being bullied, it is very difficult for them to believe that there's even another place of work. Even if they're in a really large company, it's hard for them to believe that the next department over could actually be better. And I just want to show people that it can, that you can survive, and you don't have to completely check out of this corporate world because you were in a bullying situation or because you were in a very toxic work environment.
I love that, because without hope, without vision, without possibility, nothing's going to change. To
That's
be able
right.
to see that and say, it's possible. If it's possible for you, then I can do it too. So, what are some of the things that people can do to, number one, prevent it? Let's start there.
Yeah. So I think the number one thing that people can do to prevent being bullied, or just staying in the bullying relationship as long as I did, is I think that you have to know your own values. And you talked about this from a leadership perspective, is that you have to know, who am I? What are the things that I want out of this working relationship? And what are the boundaries that I will not allow anyone else to cross? Because that was something that was really big for me. I didn't have that before. So much of who I was and my identity was tied up into the job I had. And I believed so happily and heartily in these people that I lost all trust and belief in myself. And so I think that's the number one thing that you can do, is really know who you are, know where the line is for you, and stand firm and never allow anyone to cross it.
Yes. I mean, when we talk about identity, you get me on a soapbox on that. I mean, there's so many people that, and I was there too at one point, where my identity was wrapped up in the accomplishments, in the
Yeah.
work, in the role, in the position, in what other people said. But that's such a shaky ground to operate on a good day. I
That's
mean,
right.
seriously, because you just never know, right?
That's right.
What's
And
going
I
to
and I know
happen?
that that sounds a little hokey to people, but when you think about, the person that you're talking to now, the minute somebody said something to me like, you're the worst person on the team, now I know to say, "Really a little bit." Because I'm happy to do the work and improve, but you don't have to prove that I am the absolute worst, because I've seen many of my coworkers. I know I'm not the worst,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I kind of say, like, knowing exactly who you are and what you bring to the table and knowing your value, that's the best thing that you can do to prevent staying in a bullying situation. I think that workplaces have to do more to prevent bullying. And until that happens, until we have policies and laws the same way we do around harassment that address bullying, and programs that help employees recognize bullying, we have to be mindful to not become susceptible to bullying.
Yes, that's our part.
That's our
That's our
part. Yes.
part in it. Now, when you talk about what organizations can do, one of the things that there's a lot of the DEI that's out there right now, training and all that. I am concerned about how much of it may or may not be from a place of behavior modification versus true transformation. And I'll just be
Yeah.
honest, because hey, you can say to somebody, you can't do that. That's not right. But who's to say it doesn't still get done, happen behind the scenes? And are we really shifting, the culture when it's at the level of behavior modification? Like it really has to go deeper than that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if you provide that, or if that's something that you do, or that of organizations that have done it well, that maybe you can speak to how an organization can do it where it really makes the change that it's meant to make. What
Yeah.
needs to be present? What are the keys to that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I will say, and I'm probably not the expert to speak on that at that level, is that I do think you're right in that we do have to look at this from a behavioral change level. And I know that we can address this, because if you look at the programs and how much time we've spent in teaching our children not to bully one another, I know that we can make a difference in teaching our workers not to bully one another. Because I don't have children, but I have a niece, and she's 18 now. She'll be 18 in a couple of weeks, and we're very, very close. But I remember when she was a child, like in elementary school, she came home and she was in tears and she was huffing and puffing. She couldn't get the story out. And it was simply that somebody called her a bully. And she was so offended that somebody would call her a bully. And I'm like, if we've been able to do that for our children so that they recognize the worst thing in third grade is to be called a bully, then I think we can take some of those strategies and approaches and apply them to the workplace. And I think that organizations have to get real about whether or not they really want to address that. One, I think that they need to start reviewing their data. Many companies know, where your hot spots are, where your problems are, where you're bleeding people. And I don't want to call every manager a bully, but I do want to say, where the problem is. And so you could start there by looking at what is happening culturally across my company in terms of leadership. And we have to stop playing this game with leaders where we know that they're not that great, so we just move them to another team instead of actually taking the time. Hey, just like somebody told me I was the worst person, but take the time with that leader and say, there's something here that's not working. And we believe in you, and we want to help you, and we want to invest in you. We want to offer you coaching so that you are able to have difficult conversations with employees that you feel like might not be excelling at the place where you are, instead of telling them, hey, you're the worst person on the team, and scrutinizing their work to the point where they have anxiety and depression and they can't function.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think of the unconscious bias, and we've had guests on the show speaking to that. I think about also when we talk about identity, for just like you were saying, for us to know who we are, and so that we can prevent it when somebody else is saying something to us. On the flip side, I think about insecure people are the
Absolutely.
ones that pull other people down to somehow,
Absolutely.
and it doesn't work, but they think that they're somehow gonna like level the playing field. It doesn't work. And
It
so when I
doesn't
think
work.
about, those managers and saying, how do they feel about themselves
Mhm.
that would, that would cause them to do this and to communicate in a way, in this way to another person. Wow. What if we were to work with them on that? So that I talk about this results model. It's a results, behavior, mindset, beliefs, and then identity, right? So that those beliefs, what do they believe to be true?
That's right.
And that's where that unconscious bias even applies, right? And then
Yeah.
like, what is their identity? Like you said too, it's like who are they? Who am I? So if that manager says, hey, what's going on for me that is causing me to feel in such a way that I don't feel safe, that I don't feel secure enough, that I can that I can celebrate the smart people, the high performers
Right.
around me. And I think of the successful people that I've hung out with, all of them will say that they don't want to be the smartest person in the room. If they're the smartest person in the room, they're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're secure and they know I want to have smart people around me. I want to
Yeah.
lift people up. That's the goal of leadership. And
Yeah.
again, this is my soapbox, but it's like the great leaders build leaders,
Absolutely.
not
And I
followers.
think that a lot of companies, and you talked about this a little bit before, where we're all chasing that next level, right? We're all trying to reach the next rung of the ladder, but I don't think we do enough of helping people understand that fundamental shift that happens when you start to lead people, because prior to that, you've been rewarded for being good at doing the thing. And
Yes.
so what's the identity shift that has to happen for the manager, that now I'm no longer being judged on whether or not I'm good at doing the thing, I'm judged on how well my team does the thing. And I think that's what leads to a lot of the insecurity, is that we're not really coaching and helping leaders to manage that shift in their own identity. And so that's what leads to the insecurity and the bullying, because now I don't know what the benchmark is for me. And these high performers on my team are high performing.
Yes. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. So, Zanika, this is so good. This is so good. And thank you for sharing just even a taste of this. I know you have a free guide, and I think that, let's talk about some things that people can do as next steps here. Talk about that free guide. You also have a detox program, your website. How do people get more information? And if somebody is in the position where maybe they're in it or
Mhm.
they're trying to overcome it, they've left now, like what do they do?
Yeah. So, in terms of the guide, let's start there. So, I did develop a free guide, and this is really for my people who are in it.
Okay.
Um, and I developed that because I found that a lot of people in that stage are really disengaged, and I get it because I wanted to check out too. But this guide is really just designed to help you check back in, lean back in just a little bit. So, there's 4 steps that you can implement today just to love your job a little bit more today. So, that's the free guide. And I believe we're going to share the link directly to that, but that's the free guide. And also, if you're in it right now, I think one of the best things that I can tell you to do, 2 things actually, if I may, really start planning your exit strategy. And don't let the toxicity and the bullying start to change who you are and change the things that you know to be true about yourself. And having and starting to plan that exit strategy will help you to hold on a little bit more to that. But also, I like to tell people that you've got to start dropping the lies. There is something about bullying that just it imprints something on your spirit that is not true about you. Mine was that I was the worst person on the team, that I wasn't a good communicator. And I carried that thought with me into the next job. And so start to really think about, what is this toxic environment trying to imprint on me? And start to replace that lie. It's a lie. It's not true. Whatever it is that they're attacking you on is probably exactly the reason they hired you in the first place. And
Yes.
find the grain of truth about that thing. And so for me, when they said that I wasn't a good communicator, I took a strength finder assessment, and it was my number one strength. communication. And so I looked at that thing every day and I was like, they are lying. I am a great communicator.
Yes. That's actually a really, really great practical tip on what
Mhm.
people can do. The strengths finder to
Yes.
remember who you are. Using like whether it's personality, I love that tool, personality dynamics, there's Colby, there's different assessments, whatever, Enneagram. Get to know yourself, get
Mhm.
reacquainted with yourself. I love that. And even
Yes.
like writing a list of your accomplishments, like remember who you are. I think
Mhm.
that's a great way to break off those lies. So
Yeah.
that's
And can
great.
I just add one more
Yes.
practical tip to that too? As you're doing that, start to file every email where someone says, hey, that was really good. Wow, this was good.
Yes.
Oh my God, you're so good at this thing. Start to file those things away so that when the days are really, really tough, you can just open that file and just read those things.
That's so good. I often tell the entrepreneurs that have testimonials, we think of testimonials as for the third party endorsements. And yeah, it's all good for that. It's really handy when you're having a bad day to look
They
at
are.
your testimonials and go, you know what? I actually do make a difference. Yes, I am actually doing something good. So that is so,
Absolutely.
so
I got
good.
a good one yesterday. So you are so correct. No, it was spot on.
So tell us about your 8-week work detox program.
Yeah, so the 8-week work detox program is going to open up. So we're going to open a new cohort this spring, but it's really designed to help you to start to reshape your own identity. So we talk a lot in that program about things like dropping the lies, how to replace the lies with truth, how to move forward in the face of fear. Because oftentimes when we're in these really toxic environments, there's a lot of fear there, right? Like we know what's happening to us now, and on some level there's a little comfort there, but we're terrified of what it might actually look like to take the leap. And oftentimes a lot of my clients are terrified that the lie might actually be true, right? Like I might not be good enough to get the next job, and so this is all that I have left. So we talk about how to move forward in the face of fear. We talk very specifically about with tools around how to rebuild your confidence, but we also talk about things like rest and pleasure and happiness and understanding those things and what actually brings you joy, so that you're not focused so heavily in this program on work and the terrible work environment and what the bully did to you. It really brings you back into focus, and it puts work in a proper place for you, is how I like to describe it.
That's so
We have a
good.
lot of fun. There's a lot of we do a lot of fun activities and stuff in there too.
That is so good. Shift the energy. And
Yeah.
I love that. Well, we'll make sure all of these links are in the show notes, and we'll also make sure there's a link to your website. So zenicachatman.com. And we just thank you so much for this. And I
Thank
know the
you.
work you're doing with people is so powerful and so needed right now, that not only is it about people leaving this great resignation that's happening right now, but leaving people into something, leading some people into something that is empowering for them. The next level is bringing them up, as opposed to having them feel doubtful about themselves and actually second guessing their abilities. So it's leveling them up. And so I appreciate that, in every storm, right? There's that opportunity to be
Mhm.
able to learn, to be able to grow, and to be able to even take back your own power
Yeah.
and in control of your life. And I love the way that you help people get back in the driver's seat, so that they know that they're actually, they're leading themselves where they want to go. So that is so, so good. I always say leaders of transformation take action. We can
Mhm.
listen to podcasts all day, we can hear other people's stories, and it's inspiring. But at the end of the day, you got to do something. So, as someone who's listening out there or watching, I encourage you, if you are being bullied, or if you have left that situation or in a place that you need some help, get the help that you need, get the support that you need. Do a heart check, check in with yourself on your own strengths, do a list of accomplishments. You can do that on your own. I also recommend that you go and find out what Zenica's doing, learn about her programs, get her guide. It's free. You can download. I'm sure there's going to be value for you. no matter if you're in that job or even outside that job, just to remember and to put yourself back in that place of thinking about what you love. Do something today to move you forward, even if you're depressed, even if you're feeling that anxiety, especially if you're depressed and you're feeling anxiety right now. Do something to move yourself forward so you can get unstuck, and begin to create a better life for yourself. So we encourage you to do that. We'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com, reach out to us there. Of course, you can find us on social. And if you like this episode, please share it with a friend. If you know a friend who's struggling and going through this, please share it with them. It can make a huge difference. And not to be morbid or anything like that, but there's a lot of sad stories of people that have gotten depressed and to the point of not wanting to live anymore, and we want to stop that because that is not necessary. That is there We need to come alongside each other and help each other up when we're down. And so if there's someone in your life that is struggling right now, please share this with them or just send them her website, whatever, so that they can get the help that they need to be able to move forward with confidence. We encourage you that. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.